Welcome to the Disrupt Leaders podcast. We are back for the first time. It is me, Bill, and once again, I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Julz. We've got a hot topic for the people today, Julz.
Yeah, we 100% do. So last week, we spoke about day one, week one. So this time, we're talking about month one. We spoke about the first impression bit last week and really getting off with the front foot with your people, with your manager, around your own expectations. We brought those fantastic ideas around 4 streams of expectations. So this is a little bit more on building some of those key concepts around 4 streams, getting into a bit of a routine, maybe getting into some of your people actions, and also creating a bit of a routine around coaching and all that kind of stuff. So let's get into that a little bit more. Bill, I realize you're really good with your people, right? Not that I'm not. You're the vibes master himself.
So, call me.
What are you thinking about that second stream that we spoke about, connecting your people after your leader?
Yeah.
What have you got to bring to the table around the first month?
Yeah, I think very much in the first month, the 2 main things that I always try to focus on is obviously 1, building a routine for myself, but 2, it is very much like connecting and getting to know my people. And that means like a variety of things and connecting on a variety of levels as well. We spoke very briefly last week about in the first one-on-one, you really just want to get to know who they are as human beings, really get to know what makes them tick, what motivates them, why do they come to work, all those kind of like fun bits and pieces. I think in the first month, like outside of that, it's time to start to get to know them as employees as much as know them as human beings as well. Now, we had spoken about this very briefly previously, a long time ago, around what it is that we would always start with. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the first things I really like to do after that, like outside of that cursory initial meeting, is get across the numbers. I say this all the time, but the numbers don't lie. Now, I'll also, as a bit of a stipulation, add to this, I think it's very easy to get lost in the numbers. So I'm going to put that out there for the listeners right now as a disclaimer. The numbers are important, but they are not the be all and end all. And you shouldn't get like completely lost and see someone whose numbers is worse than the rest of the team as a bad employee or anything like that. I think it very much falls in. They're called KPIs, key performance indicators. And that's what they do. All they do is they indicate. I always think I actually prefer key behavioral indicators because I think that's probably what they do more so, Jules. I don't know about you. I think they indicate the consultant's behaviors more. So for me, my first port of call, we spoke last week about your 4 streams of expectation. You have an idea from your leader what the focus is, what the team should be achieving. You've spoke to your peers, what they're currently focused on as well. So the first thing I would do to shape any actual conversation or one-on-ones, shape any of my observations, is just get across the numbers. What are they good at? What are they not good at? And I think getting to know how to read KPIs can be a bit of a skill. You can tend to see a lot of things within the data. And for example, my current workplace, one of the key focuses is live chat. And it's very interesting when you look at the stats, you see someone will have a high AAT for their chat. But just from looking at whether they've got a high message count, a long response time, any of those kind of things, it gives me an indication of whether they're over-servicing, under-servicing. And although I may be wrong, I may end up reading the chat, listening to the calls and be wildly based. I think it's always a good place to start. What do you think, Jules?
Yeah, 100%. Going back to the fact that you said before around knowing how to read KPIs or metrics is a really good talent. I think having a look at also other people within other teams or within your team that are deemed to be really good performers and comparing that with the rest. So you can use it as a benchmark going, hey, I can see someone in the other team, for example, even if they're in a sales role or a service role, whatever they're in, but you can see maybe their conversation a little bit shorter, but they're still getting great outcomes from each of these conversations. But you've got people in your team that are taking longer conversations, but not getting the outcomes. And you could kind of glean a few things out of those. And we can kind of go into those a little bit in detail in the next few episodes or within this episode, have a look around other people as well. So it's not only looking at KPIs within your team, but within the department that you happen to be in. The other thing as well is with the KPIs, we spoke about it last week, averages. I think, if you happen to start on a Monday and that Monday happens to be the worst Monday of some person's life and you happen to look at the figures, you might go, Jesus, this person's terrible, when they could be the best performer in your team. So you really want to have a look at a month, 2 months, 3 months before you join. I'm big on quarters myself. I look at if they've been in the business for that long, I look at the last quarter before I've joined to get a good idea of, okay, what kind of momentum does this person have? Do they have longevity in terms of their stats? Essentially, when I start to talk to numbers, I want to talk to, okay, can we beat our last 3 months? Not can we beat our last day or last week?
Yeah, 100%. It very much reminds me, one hot day doesn't make a summer, one rainy day doesn't make a winter. It's something that like, I say that to my team all the time when they come to me saying that they've had a bad day or they had a long call that went for ages, it's going to blow their stats out.
Yeah.
I think it's really relevant in this instance as well. And I agree with you 100%. I also tend to look at month versus month, like over the time. The consultant's results over a month are probably accurate. And that's what it comes down to what I was saying before, the numbers don't lie. On a day, on an individual day, someone can have a terrible day. Someone can have a bunch of bad calls. It is a numbers game at the end of the day, right? Like if you take enough calls and you try enough things, eventually you can kind of get there. So I think when you're looking at a month or when you're looking at a quarter, it really does paint quite an accurate picture of what someone's doing. And to give a good example of this, like when it comes to calls for a lot of our like new leaders out there, for example, if you look at someone and their customer response scores are quite low, and then you also see that their AHT is quite low, probably tells you they're not spending enough time with their clients. We've all seen those people. And then you'll get the other people that will be the opposite side. They'll have immaculate customer service scores, but they're also spending 3 times the AHT target. So I think it gives you an idea of what you need to be looking for before you start looking into any observations.
That's a really good call out, drawing parallels to your conversation with your manager and your peers. You're looking at what they said the business values. So if your business values, if you might be in a sales environment or service environment once again. So if the business values a certain metric, it's looking at that metric as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll end up valuing that, but you've got to kind of go by what they've said initially to kind of go when you're looking at those observations for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure that like when it comes to like metrics long term, the deeper you get in, we could do definitely an entire coaching session around it. Because I think much to like my earlier point, like don't get lost in numbers. Again, I cannot stress that enough. Like I see it all the time where people are, AHT is a target, but it's not an indicator really of their like actual customer service. And sometimes you might take a short-term hit for long-term gain when it comes to the numbers. Kind of to segue a little bit, Julz, I think we spoke about it a little. Obviously, with the numbers, they are really good to indicate behavior, but ultimately, and I know you feel the same way, I don't care about any of that until I've actually seen some behavior with my own eyes, listened to it with my own ears.
100%.
I don't think, as much as the numbers are good, they're very useful, very intelligent, there's no substitute for observations, whether that's like live, whether it's like post. I know you are very much on the same thoughts with this one as me.
Yeah, 100%. Observations are king for me, to be honest with you. As you said before, the numbers tell you part of the story. The other part of the story is literally sitting with your people, whether in Bill and I situation, that's a more remote concept for us. So we listen in on calls or look at chats, for example, because we're in a service/sales environment most of the time. So that's what we're kind of doing. But it might be you're in a physical location and you're a leader in a physical location for a customer service person or a salesperson. So you then want to kind of sit down with them, actually observe them, interact with a client or a customer and find out what that's like. You also can really get an understanding of why the metrics that way. So as Bill talked about before, if there's some inefficiencies you're seeing from the metrics or they're not converting as well as they should be in comparison to the rest of their peers, you can get an understanding from really observing them and get an understanding for what their style is like, which kind of then starts putting together a little bit of an understanding of when you sit down with them for a coaching session, you start to get some of those building blocks for a really successful coaching session already. What do you reckon, Bill?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think when it comes to doing those kind of observations and sitting down, I just don't think you can do enough, to be honest with you. It very much to speak to what you say, I personally prefer to do them both live and also when the consultant don't know there. I think that gives you a maximum impact. I don't know how you feel around this one, because I think it's all really good to do some obs when the person knows you're there, but they will always act differently when you are there. Whether you could come in as a new leader and give them the whole look, I don't know anything, I just want to sit with you so I can learn about the business. And they'll believe you, whatever, but they will also definitely be better, 100% better. Everything will be absolutely perfect. They won't abuse after call work. They'll be nailed on, locked in on everything that they do. So it's always good to, I don't know how you like to structure yours. How I like to structure mine is I'll try to sit with someone for an hour. I'll always try to book out an hour as far as they know. I'll actually always book out the second hour as well, straight afterward. And I love to sit with someone for an hour live in that session, listen to all their conversations, maybe talk a little bit in between calls to get a feel of what they were thinking, what they were doing. And then as soon as they hang up with me, go and listen to the next hour as well. The reason I like to do it that way is I find that like if someone is normally not like locked into their job and doing a really good job, spending an hour with me being completely locked in is quite tiring. And so if they're normally sometimes a little bit naughty, I guarantee that hour after they sit with me, you'll probably see their worst
most likely
behavior.
happen. Yeah, for sure.
And so it's when they're most likely to be lazy, most likely to lazy. I don't know if that's a fair word, but it's probably the most accurate. It's the time that they're going to let those naughty behaviors sneak in. And I think that gives you a true, accurate representation of them at their best and them at their worst. And then you can kind of get a feel for somewhere in the middle. And I think that will then help shape every single conversation I have with someone. I very much thought in my first month, I like to do as much observations as possible. But I don't think I can stress this enough for the leaders out there listening. It's not just the first month. It's every month. You should always be looking to do as many observations as you can.
100%.
And it's very easy to fall into the trap of squeaky wheel getting that grease. But even your top-end employees, if you're not doing all those observations, I guarantee some behaviors will start to slip, some things will start to creep in. And so there's no substitute for it, in my opinion. Like, I would rank doing observations, whether that's listening to calls afterwards, inline sessions, as probably my number one thing in terms of importance for me as a leader. Because I do not see how you can have a coaching session, how you can discuss someone about their behavior if you haven't actually heard, listened, or seen it.
Well, I'm biased as a performance coach, right? So coaching for me is the number one thing any leader can ever do. I think your sole purpose as a leader is to be a coach, especially I think in middle and lower senior kind of management where you're working with frontline consultants like we are. Coaching's 100% the most important thing you do. And so if you say that your coaching is informed by your observations together with the metrics, then that becomes equally as important in my head, right? So 100%, Bill. And I love what you said right now around doing them kind of pre and post coaching sessions. Fantastic. That's a really, really good habit to get into. And really, it's that rubber band effect, because you're correct. When you're having a coaching session, a good coaching session should be stretching people out. You're stretching them out as much as possible. So when you kind of let that rubber band snap back, right? Usually, most of us, when we snap back to some of those habits. So you want to make sure that at least some of that stretch remains after the coaching session. And whether it's that straight after the coaching session or maybe a couple of hours after, either way, it's your judge. You be the judge of that. And based on sometimes you have back-to-back coaching sessions or meetings, so that might not always be possible. But end of the day, or maybe the next day, you really want to kind of follow up on some of the things you do. And we can kind of delve into that later when we start talking about coaching sessions around how you can even set that as an agenda item for your person that you're working with as well. Always. Which kind of, I think, brings me to, unless you have anything else to add around observations, Bill, kind of brings me a little bit around setting that agenda for coaching sessions. So say we're kind of following in our heads, if we're following this as maybe your second or third week, you've been in the business, you've done those first one-on-ones, and we spoke about this, they're mainly kind of get to know you, how you're going, this is what I'm all about, this is what you're all about, kind of conversations. Now you want to set some real productive ones around what metrics and observations coming forward. So, and so doing these observations right now will allow you to start to set a bit of an agenda for those coaching sessions. Now, Bill and I had a bit of a conversation before that we really love to set our coaching sessions ahead of hand. So ideally, the Friday before the week that starts. So I mean, so if your coaching sessions are next week, you want to send out invites on Outlook, if you use Outlook like us, around, hey, I'm going to have a coaching session with you at 1:00 on a Tuesday, for example, and it's going to go for half an hour. What I also love to do, and it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine when people don't do this, is send a little bit of an agenda when you do that. And your observations can fill that agenda a little bit. So you can go into, I want to cover these 3 points. And the 3 points could be my observations of your interactions with clients, your input, what you want to get out of coaching. And the third thing could be, what actions do I want to end up with once we're finished our coaching session? So you could just send those three, and you send those three alone, you're already on a kind of a better streak than most people do, to be honest with you, when they send out invites. What's your kind of thought process around that?
No, I think I agree with you 100%. And this is a bit of advice. Again, obviously, we're kind of directing to new leaders. As a leader, honestly, you will notice a massive difference if you start sending an agenda out for every meeting, every huddle, every one-on-one that you do. It will just it's much like the same as when you're on a call as a consultant, right? Like structuring what you want to do. It comes the same when you're a team leader and you're in that one-on-one. It helps the consultant know the flow that the conversation is going to go, gets their buy-in, but it also sets things up in your mind so that you don't forget anything. Everything's nice and structured and ordered, and exactly where you're going to lead, and the conversation can kind of flow in that sense.
Yeah.
I think I can tell a massive difference when I go to meetings and there is no set agenda. I feel like you sit there are those meetings, and I guarantee you we've all had them as leaders, where you sit there 25 minutes into a 30-minute meeting and you're just like, what is this meeting been about? I've taken nothing from it. Whereas the meetings at the start, when they go, all right, gang, what we need to talk about today, we're here to fix problem A, so we're going to get into A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Those are usually the meetings that go phenomenally well because they're ordered and they're structured.
Correct.
I think you just made a really good point, Julz, as well, around the one-on-one. I much do the same, and I think sending it out in the email invite is perfect. It lets the person know ahead of time. Some people in today's society get very anxious, and so if they just see meeting with Julz on their calendar, meeting with Bill, they'll start to panic a little bit.
Yeah.
So having that, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, and I'm going to give you the floor to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Can you just kind of calm people down?
Other coaching sessions with people, and especially when I'm new to their space, and they go, "What's wrong? What have I done wrong?" And they start, like, the moment they start the coaching session, you're like, "Calm down, man. Oh, I haven't said a word so far. What makes you think that?" And so people have, depending on the culture they've come from as well, they could have really bad connotations with meetings with managers, especially like you and I. I've been in environments, I know you've been as well with other companies. We've been in environments where coaching's a regular thing and it's just a part of how people do business. But you also got businesses that don't really have much coaching and leadership happening on a regular basis. So when those people get invites from leadership or managers, they think it's usually because they're going to get told off, or they've had an issue, they've breached something, or a quality issue or whatever, and they're already on edge, and you just don't want that. It's going to be the death of your coaching sessions if people come in that way. You can always reverse that with the way you talk to people in the first little bit. You don't want them anxious for days on end before that meeting.
And to your point, to be honest, I always find it so surprising when you speak to leaders in usually in other organizations and stuff, and coaching is not a regular thing, and coaching is not something that they like actively pursue and actively do and don't have a set schedule. It is so foreign to me as a concept, because coaching is the best part of my role. It turns down, it is the champagne of victory, getting to sit with my person, work through something, and then come to the other side with those benefits. And I think just setting that like a really strict agenda at the start just helps it flow so much nicer. And I'm also going to say very quickly as well, if you do a huddle, like in our current workplace, we have 3 huddles a week. I think it's just as important to set the agenda in those meetings as well. Like, hey, gang, I've got 3 things I want to talk to you about today, and then when you get into a bit of fun stuff, I've got a quiz at the end or something like that. It's underrated. It is so simple. So I think that's going to be our hot tip of the week for all of you one-on-ones, all of you huddles. If you're a new leader and you've just started a new team, right now, go into your invites, edit your invites, and add that agenda in and see what change that makes. We would also absolutely love to hear, like, if you do that and you find that it has a benefit to your sessions, please do drop a comment and let us know how you get on.
I want to throw something as well, right? So the agenda is not only for your people. The agenda is also for you.
Yeah.
Right? We've kind of mentioned it from a people perspective around taking their anxiety away, giving them some structure around discussions, but it's also for you, because the amount of times, like, you have a coaching session or a huddle or something, and you go, oh, crap, I didn't cover X, Y, Z, right? And even like for people like myself, I do an agenda for almost every meeting I have. Sometimes even with that, you go on tangents, especially you and I, Bill. I think when we get together and start talking about stuff, we go on tangents.
You and I?
Yeah.
You and I?
Yeah.
Well,
we're the West. The more the vibes, the more you go on tangents. Yeah, correct. You also need that for yourself. And it sounds really boring. And one thing we spoke about, I think, early on in the last episode, and I want to really touch on again, the business is in the boring, right? You really want to put these really boring things are what structure your day, structure your success. So an agenda sounds really boring. And I know what you're thinking, right? If you're anything like myself and Bill, and you're thinking, but I'm all about the vibes, man. I want to like just jump in there and just be like the coolest dude of all, or the coolest person of all. Well, you can be, but I think the agenda allows you to just really get things done as well. Just remember that it's not always about being a flash in the pan.
Bang on. And so I think to kind of summarize like the Connect with Our People session, just for the listeners at home. So very much it is come in, get across your numbers. Once you've had that initial connection, what your people are motivated by, get across the numbers, know what you're looking for, and then do as much observations as you can. Sit in as often as you can, put as much time aside as you can to listen to calls, and then take that into a firm agenda. Like take what you listen, take what you observe, take what you learn, put it into a firm agenda, and set your one-on-one, set your coaching sessions up. To be honest, if you do that, you will probably already ahead of the pack of a lot of the leaders. It doesn't matter what organization you work in, I guarantee it will put you in a really strong spot just to have those coaching conversations. Well, my question to you is, all that's lovely, Julz. All that is lovely. How are you finding the time to do this? How are you making sure you've got the time to do this? And I think that's the big question, because as leaders, we know the best laid plans, the best intentions can all come awry. Things crop up all the time. How are you making sure that you've got time to do all this stuff? What are you doing to set your week up, set your month up, set your life up?
2 words, Bill. 2 words, calendars, baby. Just calendars.
Calendars. There's the 2 words.
Yeah. No, calendars, baby is the 2 words.
That's 3 words.
Depends. But yeah, 100%. So you want to really use your calendar. Now, most businesses use Outlook. You might use different things. You might use Macs and stuff like that. But Outlook's usually the kind of order of the day. So you really want to use that to set your week out. We spoke about checklists and stuff before, but your calendar, setting that out. So your coaching sessions, we spoke about already, the Friday before, as much as possible, set out the coaching sessions for next week, send those invites out with those fantastic agendas. And the way you kind of prioritize what goes in your calendar and how you allot certain amount of time to certain things is, a lot of people might have heard this, is there's tons of YouTube videos out there, so I'm not going to go into massive detail about this, but it's the big rocks, little rocks, and sand analogy. So the analogy around that is your big rocks are the things that are non-negotiables for the week. So I'll put coaching in that list, obviously. It could be meetings one-on-one with your manager. It could be peer meetings that are really non-negotiable, like you have to have done by the end of the week. It also, going back to those 4 streams of expectations, anything that fulfills any of those goals that your manager set out for you, your people have set out for you, those are your big rocks. Those are end of the week, no matter what, I need to have these things done. Then you go to your kind of little rocks, which are things that are supporting those. So maybe you need to do a little bit more observation on a certain person. It's good to do some observation. Maybe you do an hour of observation per person, but you find a certain person that you think, I would love to do in a half an hour or an hour. That might be a little rock, and you go, it's still very important, but not as important as getting everyone's observations out of the way. So you might still pop that into the week and prioritize that somewhere within the week, and it's nice to have that done. But then you've got other stuff that is kind of the icing on the cake, which is the sand and the water. Those are things that would be nice to have this thing done. Maybe it might be networking with other individuals within the business to make sure that you've got some, SMEs from other business lines or whatever that might mean. That those are kind of reaching outside of your team, going outside of your department and your circle of influence. Those kinds of things are fantastic to start in the first month or two as well, but they're icing on the cake. They're not what's going to make or break your week. So if you've already filled up your calendar with big rocks, the coaching and those big, really big things you want to get out of the way, or those observations and all the kind of stuff, then maybe this can be left for later. Or you need to allot a small amount of time for this, or a different way to handle it. What are your kind of thoughts around that, Bill?
Well, I agree with everything you said, right? Like you summed it up as good as I can. But what I will say, something I do want to add to flesh that point out a little bit, is how to differentiate big rock from medium rock from the sand. Because one trap that I've seen a lot of leaders fall into in the past is treating sand like they're big rocks. And they start putting 2 hours, 3 hours aside for things that just aren't achieving anything. They're not getting any benefit. They're not actually helping their consultant. And so I think the first, to differentiate your big rocks, the first things first, your 4 streams of expectations, the things your manager told you are big rock. Any commitments that you have made to your people, things that you've said you're going to do, you said, I will have this done for you by Friday, is a big rock. The same with those other expectations. I think most other things probably fall into medium, right? Some of the things that might teeter between the two that are important are crucial. For example, sending out data to your team so they know how they're performing is somewhere in the middle, but you can't spend so much time on it. You can't make that medium rock into a big rock. Or if it is a big rock, don't treat it like it's a mountain. Yeah. It's very much about and that will come with trial and error. I can't tell you how to do that. But what I would say is, have a look at the things that you're doing. The things that some things you'll be told you have to do. You have to be at this meeting by 9 o'clock. There's no getting ahead of it. That's fine. That's easy. But then when it comes to doing your reporting, if you're spending an hour, 2 hours on it, how much are you getting back for that? How much impact is that making versus just snipping it and sending it to the team in Slack? With some of those things in the first month, there'll be an element of trial and error. Do not be afraid to make mistakes. If you commit too much time to something and then you realize it's a waste of time, it's not a waste of time because you've learned not to keep putting that much time to it. Just making sure that you really, in that first month, be very analytical with what you're putting your time to and what's getting you benefit and what's not getting you benefit. And just cut the things that are not, just reduce it down. I think it's literally that simple.
To kind of jump in there around the big rocks, little rocks,
Yeah.
and prioritizing your time. One of the big things is framing that to other people within the business. You probably have to
Big
let
call.
people down at points because you go, I have to spend this time with my people. And so I can't do this particular meeting that would be nice for me to do. Ideally, I would like to spend it with someone within my team. If you haven't done sales environments before, and if you haven't been in sales before, it's all about framing that conversation. We talk about setting agendas with your team, with your people, but also with your colleagues, and find ways to do that. We use Slack in our business that we work in, but you might use Teams or whatever the case is. Can you put a status on there saying that currently I'm observing or whatever the case is? So you can really corner that time to do the thing you promised yourself you're going to do. This is about your promise. This is the expectation stream around yourself. So if you've told yourself that you're going to be doing observations at that time, I've seen it time and time again. Leaders say, this is my 1 hour observation window, 9 o'clock on Wednesday. Lo and behold, you look at them and they're kind of looking at metrics, or they're looking at some funny little Slack thing that's come up. I get it. Who hasn't brought up their phone and got
100%.
lost in a little rabbit hole of TikTok, right? They also, we all know this. We know this. But the thing is, it's about also committing to the task you've got, setting expectations. Sometimes when you tell other people that you're going to be doing a certain thing, you're most likely going to be doing it, right? Because you've just, that kind of psychological thing of promising other people. If somebody sends an invite and it's smack bang in the middle of a observation, unless it's a really urgent invite or an urgent situation that you need to sort out, it's about framing them. Go, hey, thank you so much for inviting me on this meeting. I would love to come, but I've got some commitments to my people at the moment, and I need to sort that out. And if you put it in that way, people go, oh, no, don't spend time with your people at all. Come to my meeting. Like, they're more likely either going to tell you it's urgent, or they're going to tell you, okay, we can put it another time. So get used to framing it diplomatically, but in a way, giving them the value of what you're doing and why you think what you're doing is more important at that time.
You've kind of hit the nail on the head, Julz. I think, and that comes to any of those 4 streams of expectation. If someone's asking you for your time, but you've got other stuff to do, just make it clear, be open, be honest, set those expectations and give the reason. Just wanted to flesh it out. I don't know about you, so I'll just quickly get into like planning and how I plan my week out. So on the Friday, I usually, maybe even the Thursday, if I've got the schedule a week ahead, I'll start to look at next week's one-on-ones, maybe even the next fortnight, and I'll send all the invites out. I usually have a rough idea of what I want to talk about, so I'll put a rough agenda in there. Agenda subject to change in the following week if something crops up, right? Monday morning, though, is when I do most of my planning. So the first thing I do Monday morning is come in, sort the team's results out for the last week, because I want to have that done nice and early. But then I personally structure out the rest of my week. Every hour, every minute is roughly accounted for. Now, again, I'm aware that like I know how much of this am I going to stick to, maybe 80%. But to come back to your point, I think it's very easy. If you don't put time aside for those observations, like if you have to do a certain number of call markings per month, per week, whatever it is, if you don't put time aside, they are very easy. They are big stones, but it's very easy to treat them like they're sand. Just to come back to that analogy. So I put time aside, locked in my calendar, 2 to 4 every Monday. Bang, I'm doing 2 hours. Nobody can stop me. And I think by putting that time aside, much to your point earlier, it creates a promise to myself that I'm going to do it. And it also sets that expectation with the team that, hey, during 2 to 4, only disturbability is like important. Like if it's busy and it's urgent, it's something I need help with, I'll go to him, but don't go to ask what I got up to on the weekend. That kind of thing. And so I structure my entire week out that way. And don't be afraid to change things. I think that's kind of the key message of that. Like, don't be afraid to move things if you have to move things. But I do think just give yourself that little bit of extra structure. You said it already, the devil is in the detail, it's in the boring. Doing that is boring. Being so rigid and structured is boring. So is looking at Excel and doing my reports on a Monday morning. But ultimately, they will make the rest of my week so much smoother. And me, Julz, I'm a big believer in the expression. I say it all the time. I guarantee it's not the last time you hear this on the podcast. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Taking time to plot my week out is slow, but it makes my week one smooth. It usually means I'm done way ahead of time. I want another little bonus tip as well. It is sometimes you find that like it gets into that, you're going to have to do 2 hours of call listening. Don't be afraid to schedule in a few breaks with yourself. I think team leaders very easily fall in the trap of not taking breaks. And it's very easy. If you have a lunch break that's 30 minutes and then you've got 4 hours to the end of the day and you're grinding meetings for 4 hours, that's when you'll start to switch off. That's when we'll start to lose things. What your breaks in? Monday morning, know when you're going to have lunch approximately each day. Give yourself a couple 10-minute breaks, 15-minute breaks. I see leaders sometimes feel like, hey, I'm just going to the bathroom. You don't need to tell me. You're a leader. You're an adult. Like if you want to take time, go and take time. Take 20 minutes. Take half an hour. I trust you. You're getting your work done. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
as a leader, I think don't be afraid to recognize when you do just need 10 minutes to go and sit on the sofa and scroll TikTok, because I know that when you come back from it, you'll feel a bit more refreshed, a bit more energized, and you'll be able to crack on with your work. And I think for people that have been promoted from the phones role up, it's very easy to lose sight of that. Like you're not like on rails anymore, right? Like you don't have a certain schedule. Instead, you just got an amount of work that needs to be done. And it doesn't matter whether that work top heavy on Monday and then let's work Friday, which I know is something you're a fan of as well, Julian. You and I very much work the same way. So for those listening at home, one of the things that I like to do, we mentioned the importance of observation. Generally, I would say most of mine are done by Tuesday. Like all my key observations, all the things that I need to do, the ones that I have to get done, are done by Tuesday, which then frees me up Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to do those little pebble ones, right? Because I know I've done all the big ones, I've done the ones I have to. You run the same, I believe, Jules?
Yeah, 100%. I'm big on top ending my top heavy week. Start of the week is what I like to do. I've always been the case.
Yeah.
Even when I was a consultant, when I was doing sales, I always like to do most of my work between Monday and Wednesday is what I like to do. And Thursday and Friday is ad hoc days for me. So anything that I would love to do, the sand is what I feel Thursday and Friday with, because then I'm in a better mood. Weekend's coming up as well. I've got all the stuff out of the way that I need to get out of the way for the week. So I can kind of cruise through to the weekend. But I've also done some stuff maybe self-development based or networking based or something like that on the Thursday and Friday is usually what I like to personally do. It might not work that way for everyone's business. You might find that a lot of your meetings on Mondays, I know I worked in environments where Monday from start to finish is just meetings. So the last job I had was very similar to that, where it's like you couldn't get a breather on a Monday. So you kind of had to like shift that a little bit and do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday instead, is where you kind of get most of your work done. And so, but either way, you want to kind of, I think the fact of what you said, Bill, was absolute gold dust, which is book time for yourself. I think that we can't tell you how to figure out what your big rocks are sometimes, but I think one thing I can say, or we can say, is a big rock is 100% your people. I think a medium rock would be yourself. I think anything where you're kind of doing for yourself, so your lunchtimes, book that. I always book my lunchtimes for the next sounds almost too planned out, but it just gives you that time for yourself. If you're in a fast-paced environment, like the ads say, you will 100% not have time for yourself if you don't book time for yourself. You can busy yourself with a million things as a leader. There's never things that you don't have to do, right? So booking that lunchtime, also correct, Bill, booking those times to kind of just, even if you just sort of get up from your chair, walk around, go get a cup of coffee or something, it just clears your mind, gets you energized for the next thing. We spoke about this first week around leaders don't have the luxury of being low energy for things. So if you are going into your next coaching session and you're like going to spend the first 5-10 minutes just being absolutely disoriented, you might as well take that 5-10 minutes before that and come into the session absolutely guns a-blazing and go from there. So I completely agree with that, dude.
Yeah. And I think it very much like I've seen leaders in the past that it comes to Friday evening, late Friday, and they're still doing big rock stuff. And they haven't had a lunch break 3 out of the 5 days because they're just pumping, they're doing all this nonsense. And more often than not, it comes down to a couple of things. One, they're not planning. And two, they've been prioritizing the wrong thing all week. And when it comes to Friday, they're stuck doing something that's like a mandatory task. And if they don't do it, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easily avoidable if on a Monday morning, on a Friday, you just organize yourself for the next week. And again, don't be afraid not to stick to it. You probably won't. But I think it's always good to just have that like framework in place for you to kind of stick to.
To add on to that is that if you're struggling to identify what you want to prioritize as well, is another thought that I just had was ask your people. The amount of times we see leaders just busy themselves with things that they think their people are going to love. This is going to just change the complete environment for my people. And it's awesome that you have that intention and that energy, but unless you ask your people, you're not going to know. So you ask them, sometimes you've got to do things, the business is prioritized, so you need to deliver that messaging and get those things out there for sure. But if you've got things that you're putting a lot of time and effort into, and it's something that's an add-on, and you don't know whether it's going to actually hit the mark, ask your people. Or get your people to come on the journey with you. So if they've got personal time as well within their week that they've got for self-development, maybe go, hey, I'm working on this thing. Do you want to come along on this project with me? and that can halve your time. And also you're working with your target market. So you're going to get a more effective message as well.
I also think, to add to that, checking with your people to see whether it's valuable. Don't just do it the one. I think it's a prime example.
Yes.
So I'll give you all an example of this. When I first started my current workplace, I send out stats every day so the team know where they're at to, and then we can kind of talk that briefly. But on a Monday, I used to send out a more detailed email, and I was putting a few things in, and I had like awards, like I had most valuable player, blah, blah, blah. And I'd done it in a previous workplace, the staff loved it, and I started doing it here, and I was sending it out. And first couple of weeks, the guys really liked it, and I was getting a lot of responses. The guys were like calling each other out in the Slack chat, being like, "Oh, amazing that this person was MVP. You did so well. What are you doing? What's working?" And I was getting all the buy-in I was hoping to. They were literally feeding off each other, trying to get learnings from each other. And then very quickly, it started to like taper off. It happened maybe the first 3-4 weeks, and then by week 5, week 6, I'm not really getting that at all. And I'm not putting in heaps and heaps of time, but it's probably 45 minutes ish to do all of it and to get everything together.
Yeah.
So I just kind of think, and I was like, "Hey, at first you're all around this, what's going on?" And then it was kind of just because we were so busy, no one was reading it.
Yeah.
And didn't have time to read it. And I think it was one of those things that was just like, well, I'm putting 45 minutes in to write all this fancy stuff and it's not getting read. So it's not worth my time. And if they're not getting anything out of it, why am I doing it? Because they're what I care about. It's not me. It's not my own ego, but it's the fact that they aren't getting any benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you crafted it in the first place, right? Again, well-intentioned, but you also got to make sure that your time is effective and it's always working towards a productive goal, right? So if it's not,
and
then,
again, things will change.
You might as well have used that 45 minutes to go have coffee or look at TikTok, as we spoke about before. Yeah.
Maybe get myself a little donut, treat myself good, how it is.
For sure.
I'm shopping on Amazon. We've got the internet at work. Getting around it. So I think, is there anything else you need to add around planning, Julz? I think we've covered off a lot of things. A lot of it is just around actually taking the time to set your schedule. It seems so simple, but so many leaders don't do it. It is such a simple, easy, effective way to set that week aside and then use as much of that time as you can to do observations with your team, because I guarantee I'll have an impact. Is there anything you want to see added to this one just before we wrap up?
Yeah, rule of thumb for me is, as with dieting and exercise, 80-20 rule, right? So book 80% of your calendar. 80% of your calendar. So I think you probably listened to me and Bill over the last little bit and gone, "Oh, geez, I need to book every minuscule minute of the day for the next week or so." Not the case. Book 80%. If you book your main things, the main things you want to get done for the next week, and keep 20%, which is kind of free floating space. Because as Bill said, things might prop up. You might have to move something. Another priority might come up in the middle of the week, all that kind of stuff. So you want to leave, if you've got a 40-hour working week, you want to at least leave 3 to 4 hours of that somewhere floating for you to kind of use, maybe a couple hours for you to use for other things that might come up throughout the week.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Julz, I don't know about you. I think we've had a fantastic conversation, but I think we were out of it for today. I think that's everything we wanted to talk about. So as always, thank you very much for listening to Julz and I waffle on, as we love to do. We hope you took as much out of it as we certainly have. And as always, please do like, subscribe, follow us along. It definitely helps us out a ton. And also, if there's anything you want to see us to go into a little bit more detail from today, if there's any topics we haven't covered yet that you'd love us to go into more, please do drop a comment and let us know, and we'll absolutely do that in future videos.
And also, we want to hear success stories. So if you've tried a few things
100%.
that we've spoken about in the last episode of this episode, and you've gone, "Oh, geez, that worked out fantastic. I just want to share that." It's important for other people to know in the community that people are willing to experiment and go along with ideas as well. And we obviously, the reason why we're doing this is we want to help other people. So if you kind of share something that's worked as well, please do that in the comment section. Tell us how it worked as well. You don't have to go into detail around names and numbers and all that kind of stuff. Please don't, probably for privacy's sake. But anyway, I don't want to land in hot water. But you can kind of give us a bit of an understanding of how that worked for you as well. As Bill said last episode, which kind of really resonated with me, was every day things pop up for us to still surprise us, even in our stage of leadership. So we assume that's going to happen to a lot more people, so we can learn from you as well. So please do share. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good one, legend.